My honor to be here. Thank you for coming out on an evening like this and just about filling this place out. It's my honor to be here. I was just sitting here thinking of the irony of this. One is a Lebanese stock, I'm of Indian stock, and here we are at the University of Michigan Michigan State, saying, ask us anything, whatever you want. We were in Michigan yesterday, Michigan State today. I didn't marry somebody from Michigan State, but I married a woman who was in great state. And we've been married now sort of 45 years we have, and wonderful to have that relationship. This is my first time here. I had been at the University of Michigan many, many years ago, and it was nice to be back there last night, and nice to be in your presence and have this tremendous audience. Let me start off with a lighthearted story that I think might give you a little something to chuckle about. There's this Indian guy who's flying on a plane and sitting next to Albert Einstein. Now you can tell the imagination is running wild. So Einstein looks at him and says, we've got a long flight. Why don't we play a game? I'll ask you a question. If you can't answer it, you pay me $10. He says, wait a minute, you're Einstein. He says, yeah, but then you ask me a question. If I can't answer it, I'll pay you $50. He said, so if you can't answer my question, you pay me $50, he said to Einstein. He said, that's right. And if I can't answer your question, I just pay you $10? He said, that's right. He said, well, sounds fair. Let's go for 2 or 3 rounds. But since you began this, Mr. Einstein, what is your first question for me? And Einstein said, how far is the moon from the earth? And the Indian said, you know what, I have a general idea, but I don't think I have the exact distance, so here's $10 for you. So Einstein said, now it's your question. So the Indian said, what goes up the mountain with 3 legs and comes down with 4 legs? And Einstein started thinking of all of his studies in entomology and so on and so forth. What goes up the mountain with 3 legs and comes down with 4 legs? And Einstein dipped into his pocket and gave the Indian $50. So now it was Einstein's turn again. He said, before I ask you my question, what does go up the mountain with 3 legs and come down with 4 legs? And the Indian dipped his hand into the pocket and gave him $10. So I don't know how this Q&A time is going to go with a Lebanese and an Indian, but I hope there's not big money involved in this. Post-mortem of a post-truth culture. Many years ago, when I was spending a semester at Cambridge in England in 1990, in the middle of that semester, I took my oldest daughter and my second daughter, Sarah and Naomi, and my wife, and we went to witness a trial at the Old Bailey. You can go into the galleries and watch a trial in progress, provided it is not of a subject matter where a minor cannot come in. And as it happened, when we walked into the galleries and sat down, there was a guard standing there. And when he saw our 2 girls, he said, how old are you? And the second one was a little too young for it. He said, I cannot allow you to come, but I can allow your older daughter to come. And she was at that time 15, our oldest daughter. So my wife and I and a couple of friends and Sarah sat in the gallery. My second daughter and son were being taken care of by somebody. Unknown to us, it was a very, very hard trial to sit through. There were 2 young minor gals who had charged a middle-aged man with having raped them several months ago. And because they were minors, they were not in the center of the courtroom. They were secluded in private rooms, and only the attorneys could take a look at them through a television screen and asking them questions. We couldn't see them, but we could see the man who was charged. And I remember how the human heart works immediately, looking at him and starting to make some judgments, which were not good and probably not even fair. But I thought to myself, how could a man like this sitting there have exploited and abused 2 young gals like that? And the questioning began. We sat through it. My daughter, who wanted to go into law later on, said, I really want to watch this, Dad. And then the man defending this client took to the lectern. And he said something fascinating to begin with. He looked at the television monitors and he said, I want you girls to know, I am not here to hurt you. I am not here to make it difficult for you. I'm not here to embarrass you. And if you don't want to get into any details, you don't need to get into any details. But I want to tell you why I'm going to talk to you. I'm only interested in one thing. Just one thing. When I ask you a question, tell me the truth. That's all I want to know. And if you don't want to answer the question, I will allow you to say, I don't want to answer that question. But if you answer my question, tell me the truth. Do you understand what I'm saying? And the girl said, yes, we do. So he began. He said, you know, this happened many, many months ago. Why did you choose to wait so many months before you told your parents? And they went into their answers in a childlike way, and you were listening to their sweet little voices. And the resistance to that individual was building the whole time. But then he shot this question. He said, is it true that on the night you told your parents, 1 hour before that, this man saw you at a place that you did not wish to be seen? And when he saw you, you expressed shock. And he told you when he got back home that night, he was going to come up to your home that evening and tell your mommy and daddy where he saw you and what you were doing. Is that true? One was silence, and the other one said, I can't remember. I can't remember. I said, okay. And gradually the case began to collapse. I don't know what really happened. I couldn't know with the brevity of time that we were there. But it was amazing that my 15-year-old daughter, too, as we walked out, Dad, something's not right with this whole story. Something's not right. You see, whatever was going to happen that night, one of two things was a certainty, that a man's reputation was going to be tarnished. And the other certainty was, if it truly happened, two young girls' lives were going to be permanently damaged, physically, psychologically, emotionally, which means we needed to know the truth. What really happened. Truth is primarily a property of propositions, which conforms to reality when an assertion is made as that reality really is. That's why Winston Churchill, talking about warfare, made this comment. He said, the most valuable thing in the world is the truth. The most valuable thing in the world is the truth. In fact, it is so valuable that oftentimes it is hidden by a bodyguard of lies. Natan Sharansky, the Soviet political prisoner, when he was released and went on to his homeland of Israel, came back returning with his wife, and as he went to the prison where he'd been incarcerated for all those years in solitary confinement, asked if he would go enter in. And as his wife was holding his arm and walking in, he paused and said, do you mind if I go at it alone for the first few minutes? Because this is where I actually found myself. She stepped back. He went in. Came back about 30 minutes later, and it was obvious the tears had been running down his face. And he asked for his wife to see the prison, and then he said, before I talk to you as press reporters, can I please go to the gravesite of the great physicist Andrei Sakharov, who gave to us the atomic bomb? I want to lay a wreath at his grave. And they wondered what was happening. So he goes and lays a wreath at the grave of Andrei Sakharov and comes back to a battery of microphones, and he says this to the media. He said, before Sakharov died, he made this comment. He said, I always thought that the most powerful weapon in the world, was the atomic bomb. He said, I have changed my mind. The most powerful weapon in the world is not the atomic bomb. The most powerful weapon in the world is the truth. It's the most valuable thing in the world, says Churchill. It's the most powerful weapon in the world, says Andrei Sakharov. And you and I now live in a post-truth culture, so-called. There's a soft meaning to it, which Abdu has dealt with, and the idea being that my feelings and emotions and desires outweigh the facts. But there's a hard reality to the post-truth culture. It goes one step further. I am giving myself permission to even fabricate a story and manufacture a story and tell you things that I know are untrue, because the goal I have in mind is a noble goal for something greater, so I can make up stories which are untrue in order to attain a greater end. That is really the hard meaning of the post-truth culture, and The Economist magazine, which dealt with it, gives these ideas to you and to me. The soft version, the facts don't matter, my feelings and desires do. The harder version, I'm even allowed to fabricate and tell you falsehoods in order that I may attain something even greater. Many years ago, the former Soviet Union shot down the plane KAL-007. I remember many times taking that flight and my wife taking it. And I shuddered when I saw that it had been shot down by a pair of planes, and all of those on board came just spilling down to the earth in bits and pieces. And there the Korean people were waiting at the Seoul airport, waiting for their family to arrive, only to find out the commercial airliner had been gunned down by the Soviets. An interchange took place. And the fascinating thing is that you had Vladimir Posner of Pravda interacting with William Safire on the American side. And William Safire asking Posner, how in the name of reason could you do this? And he went on to say, Posner said, well, you know, the lights of the plane were not on. We commanded the captain to turn the lights on, and he did not turn the lights on. We had no choice but to conclude it was on an espionage mission. William Safire looked at him and said, that's interesting, Vladimir. In the script that we now have from the black box, it says that the lights were on. Posner said, you got that wrong, Mr. Safire. What was happening was the two Russian pilots, one on either side of this plane, when they referred to the lights being on, one pilot was referring to the other pilot's lights being on, not the commercial airliner. Safire shot back. He said, do you want me to give you the exact wording of what one of your pilots said to the other pilot? He said, Vladimir, here are the words. Target's lights are on. There was pin drop, silence. The irony of the Russian newspaper is that it's called Pravda, which means truth. When I had the privilege of speaking at the geopolitical strategy in Moscow with a whole faculty of atheists in front of me, I'll never forget the closing lines as we walked out. For about 3 hours, I was grilled and asked to be defending theism. It was a torturous 3 hours with the hostile looks in their eyes. My wife was sitting next to me, one of my colleagues. As I answered their question one after another, you could see the softening come upon their faces. And then they lined up in order to bid us goodbye. They took the back of my wife's hand and kissed her hand. And then when my turn came, the head of that institute with 4 stories below ground, 8 stories above ground, where all of their leaders have been trained and all of their pictures on the wall, grabbed my hand and he said, Mr. Zacharias, I want to thank you for coming here. I believe what you have said today to be the truth, but it's very difficult to change after 70 years of believing a lie. It's very difficult to change after 70 years of believing a lie. I want to take you through a short journey on what the whole idea of truth really means and why it is so relevant. One of my great heroes was Malcolm Muggeridge, the British journalist. And he wrote these two statements in different settings. And by the way, Muggeridge was a man leaning towards Marxism and communism. And he went as a young journalist to Russia with the desire to emulate it and embrace it. When he saw all that the tyranny under Stalin had taken place and 15 million of the Russian people slaughtered at his behest, he wrote a lot of things about it, especially in his book, Winter in Moscow. But one of the statements he made in his article was this: truth is very beautiful, more so I consider than justice, today's pursuit, which easily puts on a false face. In the nearly 7 decades I have lived through, the world has overflowed with bloodshed and explosions, whose dust has never had time to settle before others have erupted, all in purportedly just causes. The quest for justice continues today, while the weapons of hatred are piling up. But truth was an early casualty. The lies on behalf of which our wars have been fought and our peace treaties concluded, the lies of revolution and counter-revolution, the lies of advertising, of news and of salesmanship, of politics, the lies of the priest in his pulpit, the professor at his podium, the journalist at his typewriter, the lies stuck like a fishbone in the throat of the microphone, the handheld lies of the prowling cameraman. Ignatius alone told me once how, when he was a member of the old Comintern, some stratagem was under discussion, and a delegate, a newcomer who had never attended before, made the extraordinary observation that if such and such a statement were to be made, it ought not to be made because it wouldn't be true. There was a moment of dazed, stunned silence, and then everyone began to laugh. They laughed and laughed till tears ran down their cheeks, and the Kremlin halls seemed to shake. The same laughter echoes in every council chamber and cabinet room. Wherever 2 or more are gathered to exercise authority, it is truth that has died, not God, says Muggeridge. And Muggeridge, in his own journey to Christ, had an amazing path to follow when he wrote the book Jesus Rediscovered. I had the privilege of spending a day with him in England 7 months before he died, as he was telling me he would be willing to write the foreword to my first book that was coming out that year. And I remember listening to him as a journalist, and he told me how he began to rebel against his own profession because they could manufacture news, distort reality, and get the masses to read ideas that they wanted them to receive. That's why he says the lie stuck like a fishbone in the throat of the handheld microphone. So much goes on in the media world today and in the political world, and probably much else, where distortions and untruths are pummeled into your mind and mine, and we are asked to take it to be true. But Muggeridge went on to make this comment. Listen very carefully, please, because this deals with relevance. In this Sargasso Sea of fantasy and fraud, how can I or anyone else hope to swim unencumbered? How can we learn to see through and not with the eye? How do I take off my own motley and wash away my own makeup? How do I raise the iron shutter and put out the studio lights, silence the sound effects and put the cameras to sleep? May I ever watch the sunrise on Sunset Boulevard and set over Forest Lawn? Can I find furniture in the studio props, silence in a discotheque, love in a striptease, read truth of an auto cue, catch it on a screen or chase it on the wings of Muzak? Can I view it in living color with the news, hear it in living sound along the motorways? No, not in the wind that rent the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks, not in the earthquake that followed, nor in the fire that followed the earthquake, but in a still small voice. Not in the screeching of tires either, or in the grinding of brakes, or the roar of jets, or the whistle of sirens, not in the howl of trombones, the rattle of drums, or the chanting of demo voices. Again and again and again, I long to hear that still small voice, if I could only catch it, the voice of God. And he finally did. You see, truth on all things matters, but it matters most of all about why you and I are here in the first place. What does living really mean? What do you and I have to speak of the meaning and purpose in life? Lee Iacocca said years ago, Here am I in the twilight years of my life, still trying to figure out what this is all about. I just want you to know that fame and fortune, said he, are for the birds. Jack Higgins, who wrote The Eagle Has Landed, was interviewed and asked, what is it you now know that you did not know as a young man? He said, I know this. I wished I'd known as a young man what I know now, that when you get to the top, there's nothing there. You look at the tragic life of a genius in Ernest Hemingway and how he finally snuffed his whole life out, struggling to express physically even his sensual longing and unable to do it, and confessing that it was leaving him an emotional cripple when even his body could not respond to what his mind and emotions were really calling for. And so I say to you, it is vitally important for you as a student to answer the question, what does living really mean? Why is it here? Why are we here? Do we end up like Camus, who ends up saying that the loneliest moment in life is when you have just experienced that which you thought would deliver the ultimate, and it has let you down? Ironic that Sartre, Camus, Oscar Wilde, so many thinkers who wrote in drama and the arts ended up struggling in the final moments of their lives, asking what the purpose was really all about. Jesus made that audacious claim, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one comes unto the Father except through me. Standing before Pontius Pilate, he said, they that are on the side of truth, listen to me. Pilate said, what is truth? And walked away, never waited for the answer. Why is Jesus the truth? Abdu has hinted at a couple of them. May I give you at least one or two more? He is the truth because he is the only one that I know has truly diagnosed the human heart the way it really is. The human heart, the way it really is. My life was changed when I was in my 20s, and I went to Vietnam. No, I didn't go to fight the war. I went there as a chaplain's assistant. I was a student in Toronto, Canada at that time. And I asked if I could go, and I was invited to speak to the American troops. I remember seeing death and destruction, and so many young minds having no idea why they were even there. The savagery that had gone on. I visited a military hospital where there were 2 to a bed unless you had burns in your body. I remember watching so much of destruction and warfare that I left there and went to Singapore after 4 months. And I walked the streets of Singapore the first night, just about all night long. I walked and walked and walked, smelling and breathing in free air for the first time. And I said, God, what are we doing to ourselves as human beings, treating each other as animals? And then in 1980, for the first time, I went to Auschwitz, and I saw what havoc had been wreaked under the aegis of the Third Reich. And I saw a statement by Hitler just outside the gas ovens. I want to raise a generation of young people devoid of a conscience, imperious, relentless, and cruel. In Auschwitz alone, they were eliminating them at the rate of 12,000 every day. The human heart is desperately wicked. You and I are capable of extraordinary things. But here's the thing. What Jesus Christ offers is so unique in worldviews. We call it the new birth. It is a miracle. We call it the new birth because it changes the desire, changes the hunger, and changes what is it you really want. I would never have believed it as a non-theist going to my 17th year of life when I cared not for any religion in India, which has 330 million gods in the pantheon of Hinduism. All of the major religions in the world, and if India had not separated from Pakistan, they would also be the largest Islamic nation in the world. We are steeped in religious ideas in India. All of the major religions of the world represent that. I was fed up of all of them, had no interest. I'd certainly never opened a Bible. I don't even know if he had one in the house. But there I was at the age of 17, having tried to take my own life because I had no meaning. I had no meaning. I had to admit it. And in that hospital room at the age of 17, a Bible was brought to me and given to me. I couldn't hold it. My body was dehydrated. And the man who brought it wanted to read it to me. My mother said, I don't even know how you've come in here. My son's dying. He said, Madam, he needs this more than anything else. She said, leave it with me. And he opened it to John chapter 14, where Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. My mother, with her stuttering English in the King James Version, started to read it to me, and then these words, because I live, you also shall live. I turned my life over to Christ. My father would tell you if he were alive today, he would never believed what happened to his son, and never would have believed what ultimately happened to him. Christ is the transformer of the human heart. He changes us from our derelictness to give us new hungers, to give us new hope, to give us new meaning. I would not be doing this now as a 70-year-old around this world if I didn't truly believe that Jesus Christ not only describes your heart, but offers the cure for your malady and changes that heart, changes the hungers. And so, I close with this. Songwriters say it best. Philosophers can climb the ladder of abstraction. Theorists can use words. Songwriters tell it like it is. That's why Andrew Fletcher, the Scottish fellow, a political theorist, said, let me write the songs of a nation. I don't care who writes its laws. Here's one from the Moody Blues in the 70s. Cat's Foot, Iron Claw, Neurosurgeon, Scream for More, From Paranoia's Poison Door, 21st Century Schizoid Man, Blood Rack, Barbed Wire, Politicians, Funeral Fire. I'm sorry, that's not Moody Blues. I've got another one coming in Moody Blues. You know who, I think this was King Crimson. Cat's Foot, Iron Claw, Neurosurgeon, Scream for More, From Paranoia's Poison Door, 21st Century Schizoid Man, Blood Rack, Barbed Wire, Politicians, Funeral Pyre, Innocents Raped with Napalm Fire, 21st Century Schizoid Man, Death Seed, Blind Man's Greed, Poets Starving, Children Bleed, Nothing He's Got, He Really Needs, 21st Century Schizoid Man. The walls on which the prophets wrote is cracking at the seams. Upon the instruments of death the sunlight brightly gleams. Will no one lay the laurel wreath as silence drowns the screams? Between the iron gates of fate the seeds of time are sown, watered by the deeds of those who know and who are known. Knowledge is a deadly friend when no one sets the rules. The fate of all mankind, I see, is in the hands of fools. Confusion will be my epitaph as I crawl a cracked and broken path. If we make it, we can all sit back and laugh. But I'm afraid tomorrow I'll be crying. Moody Blues sang this one. Why do we never get an answer when we are knocking at the door with 1,000 million questions about hate and death and war? Because when we stop and look around us, there's nothing that we need in a world of persecution that is whirling in its greed. Why do we never get an answer when we're knocking at the door? And then it ends with these two lines. I'm looking for someone to change my life. I'm looking for a miracle in my life. To you here at this great University of Michigan State, we are here to answer your questions on why we believe Jesus Christ is the one who brings that miracle and brings that change in your heart for greater things and purer objectives and the ultimate purpose for which God has fashioned you. His word is truth. He is the way, the truth, and the life. Thank you for giving us both a hearing. May God bless you.